So Russia and Ukraine take center stage on our show today. Russian President Vladimir Putin has raised the nuclear spectre in Ukraine. And not just that, he has ordered partial mobilization of forces, a first for Russia since World War II, an issue that was also addressed at the UNGA by Ukraine's president. What could Putin's decision mean for the war in Ukraine and its Western partners? We delve deep in the following report. Vladimir Putin sent shockwaves across Russia and the international community. This as he ordered the country's first mobilization since World War II.
Russian citizens can be sure that the territorial integrity of our homeland, our independence and freedom will be provided. I will stress once again, with all the means at our disposal. Those who try to blackmail us with nuclear weapons should know that the wind can turn their way.
What followed were anti-war demonstrations, these denouncing Putin's decree. More than 1,300 have been arrested, and those who aren't protesting are fleeing. Flights out of Russia rocketed in price. The attention soon shifted to the UN General Assembly's 77th session. In his address, the US President Joe Biden declared Russia's invasion of Ukraine a violation of the global order.
Russia has shamelessly violated the core tenets of the United Nations Charter. No more important than the clear prohibition against countries taking the territory of their neighbor by force.
The reactions didn't stop at that. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's pre-recorded speech outlined a 5-point peace plan that included punishment for aggression and security guarantees. Zelensky also demanded that Russia be punished for its crimes in Ukraine.
A crime has been committed against Ukraine, and we demand just punishment. The crime was committed against our state borders. The crime was committed against the values that make you and me a community of the United Nations. And Ukraine demands punishment for trying to steal our territory.
It should be noted that Putin's mobilization is no ordinary development. Firstly, it is a direct escalation of the conflict, one that would involve 300,000 additional personnel to fight in Ukraine. Secondly, it comes days after news of Russia losing ground in parts of northeastern and southern Ukraine. This includes Ukraine's advancement at lightning speed in Kharkiv and Kherson. What's surprising is that it was only last week that Putin had hinted at ending the war. This during his bilateral with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the SCO summit in Uzbekistan. Nonetheless, India has maintained its tough stance on Russia at the UNGA too.
The trajectory of the Ukraine conflict is a matter of profound concern for the entire international community. The future outlook appears even more disturbing. The nuclear issue is a particular anxiety.
In the meantime, the Kremlin has begun referendums in Ukraine's Moscow-occupied regions. These include 4 regions: Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhia. The vote will lead to Russia's formal annexation of swaths of territory, something already done in the case of Crimea in 2014. Russia's move has already received Western condemnation, perhaps because the vote will only escalate the war between Russia and Ukraine, backed by the NATO military alliance, only raising the dreaded possibility of World War III. Bureau Report, CNN News 18. And so this is the turning point in the war between Russia and Ukraine. But what does it mean for Russia and for the Western allies of Ukraine? Let's try and get in a sense of perspective. And for that, I'm joined in by CNN's Claire Sebastian, who's joining us live from London with more. Many thanks to you, Claire, for joining our broadcast today. Now, Claire, Putin's partial mobilization has sparked protests across Russia. Over 1,000 have been arrested. What will Putin's military call-up possibly mean for Russia and the war?
Yeah, so for the war, I think it's not exactly clear what this means yet. Experts will tell you that even if they do manage to call up 300,000 people, as the defense minister said, that will happen in waves and it will take some time to get them trained up and onto the battlefield. So certainly if you look at the comment today from the Institute for the Study of War, which is a think tank, they believe that this will be just enough forces to offset Russian casualties on the battlefield, not enough to turn the tide. So it's not exactly clear that this will change Russia's fortunes on the battlefield, but it will most likely allow them to keep going for longer in this war, which of course sets up a challenge for Ukraine. But as for Russia itself, we are seeing a bit of a sea change. For the first time in about 6 months, we're seeing protests, anti-war protests on the streets. More than 1,300 people as of Thursday have been arrested, according to the independent monitoring group OVD Info. That is, a relatively small number based on what we saw at the beginning of the war. But given the climate in Russia, the criminalization of even calling this a war, the intensifying of penalties for things like evading military service and desertion, it is significant. These people who are showing up on the streets are demonstrating significant bravery. We're also seeing signs of queues at the border and increased demand for flights and an increase in prices for flights. So you do get the sense anecdotally at this stage that there is a growing tide of panic. So far in this war, it really hasn't affected the everyday lives of Russians that much. It appears now that is changing. Even though this is a partial mobilization, even though it's only really people so far who have served in the military, who have some military experience, most people will know someone who is at least believed to be eligible. So this is now hitting home for Russians.
All right. Also, Claire, after reclaiming major territories, Ukraine has now reached a turning point in this war. But with Putin now resorting to partial mobilization, even threats of nuclear retaliation and referendums in Russian-backed territories of Ukraine, what are the challenges ahead for President Volodymyr Zelensky?
Yeah, Ukraine has had a significant turnaround in the last couple of weeks. They were able to take a lot of territory, about 8,000 square kilometers in the east of the country, in this counter-offensive that was such a tactical victory over Russia. Now the progress has seemed to slow in the last week or so. They are still moving forward, but at a much slower pace. Russia is also fighting back in some areas, making very small gains. So the challenge for President Zelensky, is that, especially in the face of Russian mobilization, is to try to keep up the momentum, and he needs to do so, of course, with continued support from the West. He spoke to the UN General Assembly. He's garnering support. He's trying to make sure that he can continue to get that support and that supply of weapons from the West, which has made such a difference on the battlefield. And the other part of this for President Zelensky, because wherever you see Russia retreat in this war, where Ukraine has been able to take back territory, we saw it at the beginning of the war in April with Bucha and the areas around Kiev, you do see more and more evidence of Russian atrocities. We just saw it with the city of Izium, where more than 400 unmarked graves were found, mainly Ukrainian civilians. He wants Russia held to account. He has been demanded that they remove their UN veto power. He wants a tribunal set up to hold them to account, and he is going to continue to put pressure on the global community to do that, to try to tighten the screws in that way.
Right, and understandably